Well, we have a deal. SAG is now officially, SAG-AFTRA has got a deal with the AMPTP, and the actors are getting back to work. And as a result of that, Hollywood is getting back to work.
Yes.
So there's a lot of ramifications of that. Like that includes things like, movies being moved around, productions restarting, movies that stopped production as far back as like the beginning of summer when the writers went on strike.
I feel like
So there's
the ramification is like a really harsh word for something we've been waiting around for. Has a little bit of a negative context there. There are obviously going to be some struggles moving forward, but they're all good things, right? I think the biggest issue moving forward is just going to be juggling schedules. So I'm sorry I cut you off, Dan. I was just like, these people are going to watch this and they're going to be like, oh no, it's not good that we went back to work.
No, that's totally fair. Like I think ramifications in the sense that there is a certain negative side to it from the perspective of, let's say, the distributors, because we
Mhm.
know that we're going to end up with probably a period some point in 2024 where we're going to have like a desert of like basically no
Yeah, there's
movies
going to
coming
be
out.
some super dead space. I'm kind of thinking of the strike being over as, you remember when COVID hit and everything reopened and then everything shut back down again and then everything reopened and then there were just some restaurants that never opened during that first opening. I guess where you live, maybe it didn't happen like that, but in LA, New York, and in Miami, I know we had like two separate shutdowns. So in LA specifically, there were restaurants that just couldn't open in the intermediary between those two open shut, because it costs like $50,000 for a restaurant to reopen based off of health codes, cleaning, restart, whatever. I'm looking at us all going back to work after so long shut down as just being one massive expense of like schedules, juggling this. We're going to see movies move. We're going to see actors shift. We are
Right.
already going to be sort of like waiting for recasts as movies that weren't yet in production can't now juggle their schedules. So I think that's going to be just the biggest issue. And next summer, yeah, things are gonna be, I would just honestly say the first half of next year is going to be a very touch and go when it comes to box office.
No, I agree. And the biggest thing that I was looking at here is like let's take a step back. Let's talk
Mhm.
about the deal itself,
Yeah.
because like SAG-AFTRA was lauding this as like a billion, but deal that's worth $1 billion.
Yeah.
There's unprecedented provisions in it, and the language with which, the flowery language with which they're describing the whole deal, I felt like, like the studios ultimately like came back from some very unreasonable like AI demands, and then they finally basically they had to kind of, I don't want to say capitulate, but like I think the studios had to sort of give up on some of their ambitious AI dreams like that they had, at least for the
Yeah.
time being,
I mean,
which I think is a good thing because they were asking for
yeah.
some very weird stuff,
I mean, they
dead
literally wanted
actors that
like,
they wanted to.
yeah,
Yeah, go
like
ahead.
dead actors, they wanted their scans for life. Isn't that insane?
Exactly.
Can you
That's exactly.
imagine Pedro Pascal being immortalized via like, obviously Pedro Pascal is very much alive, but I'm just thinking 50 years down the road from now, I hope he lives to be a very old man. Let's say 80 years from now. And the studios are like, well, we got him to do that scan and he's dead now. So now we're gonna make like a Gladiator 4 with his dead IA scans. Like that's so creepy. That is so creepy to me. I can't get with it. But that's essentially what AMPTP wanted. They were like, we want these people's these people's stuff for life. And I'm like, oh God. I will also tell you, I am a little bit happier about this IA deal because I did work an ESPN scanning job with so essentially ESPN has my digital scans for like video games in the future. And so now this really limits all that they can do with it, which makes me happy.
Yeah. I to me, the biggest thing that I think, like, and look, AI protections are important, but
Mhm.
like I walked away with this thinking, I think the biggest win here was the residual structure, which was,
Yeah.
I think, truly. And I know that it was difficult to kind of figure out the whole situation with AI, and I think that will be an issue in 3 years again when they go back to the table for another deal. But really, where I thought like they needed to figure something out now because it's sort of overdue is the residuals on all the streaming stuff. And I don't know if they've necessarily got anything that was ideal for either side, but the deal that they got in place does provide more compensation, like way more compensation than what actors used to get from streaming. So that's, I think, ultimately was the goal here, which I think was overdue, considering that I think Netflix has been around now for like 2 decades or like a decade and a half of just being a streamer. Before, of course, they were doing DVDs by mail. And so the streaming era has been around for so long. I think it's
Mhm.
well past, due time that
Yeah.
actors got paid fairly for their contributions to all the like the big hits in the world of streaming, which is a big part of
And
our entertainment landscape.
we still don't know exactly what the agreement is, you guys. We would just like to make that very clear. SAG is keeping that under wraps until it is completely reviewed by the board and ratified, and that process will start on Tuesday. All we know is what SAG is telling us, which is essentially this is like the biggest historical wage increase for actors of all time, which is incredible because you literally felt like a breath of fresh air. I didn't say that correctly. A breath of fresh air here in Los Angeles, California. Like it is so crazy how literally all of a sudden I'm getting auditions again. I got a call from a casting director. Like people are just like, things feel like a renewed hope. There's renewed hope in the city of angels, everybody, because it was starting to feel a little like the energy of the whole city was like not moving. Everybody was just like mad depressed. I mean, people are still driving like crazy people, but that's just LA. So, I mean, it is what it is. But that's where we are.
I mean, yeah, I did hear that you were getting like basically inundated with auditions this week, which I mean is a great
Good thing.
thing to
Yeah.
have, obviously. And it seems like, yeah, Hollywood is back to work. Deal making is back to in full swing. I was reading the articles in Deadline about the strike, and it looks like, yeah, a lot of actors are, who are probably either gonna be entering negotiations or were in consideration for roles, but then all of that work had to be shut down, now
Mm-hmm.
resumes, including like big movie franchises that are trying to pick up, and it's like the DC movies, for example. And of course, like you mentioned, there's a big impact on the economy in California. Like in that Deadline article that I was reading, which we have on screen, is it mentioned that over the course of the 6 months in Hollywood, like with the WGA strike and with the SAG strike, they've had an impact of what, like $6.5 billion,
Yeah.
and like 45,000 entertainment industry jobs were affected. So that's a huge number. I mean, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of money that's just being pulled out of the economy. And like you said, in COVID, like there were restaurants that shut down because of COVID and never opened back up because they just, couldn't afford to, like,
Yeah.
keep paying the bill, like the rent, while they were not making any money. And 6 months is, and certainly like there's probably businesses that were still feeling the effects of that. And now this being like a secondary wave where they had to shut down, I can imagine there may be like neighborhoods where you might go see restaurants that you used to go to, and now that you're going back to work and you want to go get lunch there, they may not be open anymore,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate, but at least we're back up and running. That's a good thing. That's
Yeah.
definitely a good thing.
Um,
I did want to, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
no, it's okay. Yeah, so I definitely feel like, we're back to work. There were a lot of things that were on the line prior to the SAG strike ending, including Beyonce's Renaissance tour. Did you see that they didn't grant her an interim agreement? And so she didn't release her full promo on her Instagram until the day the strike was over. They announced the
I
strike was
didn't know
over
that.
and she released her promo. It was like
Well,
crazy. It was like the day before they agreed on the deal. I saw this article that Beyonce's Renaissance tour was not, because she's a part of SAG. Taylor Swift is, I guess not, even though Taylor Swift has acted. Maybe she didn't care, maybe she didn't, I don't know. But for some reason, Beyonce was not granted an interim agreement.
That is we yeah.
I don't
I
know
mean, though
why.
it explains the whole lack of marketing around the movie, which
Yeah.
is something that I was wondering about. I was like, for something that's coming out in 3 weeks, we haven't really seen much.
Yes. So she released like a promo on her Instagram, which probably, I mean, she has like millions and millions and millions of followers. So that's a good way to get the word out. But yeah, I didn't hear anything about it. And then it seemed really strategically planned. Like we got an email, I got a deadline email, and then Beyonce released her promo. I was like, oh, yeah. And although she might still get in trouble for releasing that prior to the deal being ratified, but I don't know. I don't know what the restrictions. There's a lot of gray areas that we just don't know about. And there was a lot of gray areas like during the strike as well. It's like, are hosts allowed to talk about movies? Are we allowed to do any, like, what are we allowed to do? What are we not allowed to do? And although SAG had released so many bulletins about it, there's a lot of gray area in which it gets a little fuzzy. So we're just happy it's over and we don't have to deal with all of that. But I do wonder what the repercussions are going to be in the next 10 years of like people that maybe didn't go fully buy it, people that showed up at Fashion Week events. I mean, like, I'm curious to know how far they'll take it.
I mean, look, I know that for us, like this is something that we did a lot of out of theater reviews, and I know that there was like when the strike started, it just they slowly started to kind of like expand it beyond just the scope of the guild members who are part of the guild right now. It was also like if you're gonna want to be a part of the guild at some point, then you better not be doing anything that's gonna be going against, what
Yeah.
the strike rules are. And then also things like even if you're a social media influencer, there were rules for that. So like we
Yeah.
couldn't really do a lot of out of theater reviews because that was technically even though it wasn't something that was endorsed by the studios that making the movie, we were still really not technically allowed to do out of theater reviews. So we sort of had to kind of put a kibosh on that. So yeah, definitely I think I don't know if this is going to be one of those situations where because it almost feels like one of those movie things like in Captain America the Winter Soldier where they have like the helicarriers like targeting all these potential enemies of Hydra and like
Yeah.
I
I'm
don't think
just
they're gonna
wondering
go
how much of a
hunting.
witch hunt it's going to be. You know what I mean? And I think there's no way to really see that. Everybody, I mean, you would hope that SAG wouldn't do that because it's not in their best interest. Do you know what I mean? But I don't know. You never know.
I yeah, I certainly hope that they don't go down that road. Maybe like they'll only kind of come after like the most egregious,
Yeah. So
violators of the policy.
there's a lot to say that we just don't know about at this point. We can only speculate. What we do know is that stuff that was already in production, such as Deadpool 3, Gladiator 2, and then there's a handful of other ones that were already in production and had to pause midway when the strike started. Those are the priority right now. Those are immediately reshooting. But new movies that haven't yet started filming, those are going to wait until after the holidays, which will push the schedule back a little bit. We just don't know by how much. It could literally
Yeah.
be January 2nd. Everybody is back on board, back in the studios, back filming on set, on location, and like is on strict lockdown for the whole month while everybody tries to catch up. Because I know the studios are trying to save some of the box office money that they were expecting for next year, but who knows? We don't know. Do you know
It's
about that?
yeah, and the other thing about that is there's a lot of movies that like were partly done filming, like Beetlejuice 2 had started, I think. Deadpool 3 was certainly a good ways along.
I think they said they
Um,
were 50% finished.
Something like that, yeah. And even Captain America, was it New World Order, or they're calling it something else now, like Brave New World, the Captain America 4. So like those are some of the big
Captain
moves. Like I was,
America. Oh, it's the new
yeah,
Captain America.
it's
Okay.
the new fourth movie in the series, I guess. The first one with Anthony Mackie in the
I
role of
was
Captain
like,
America.
so Captain America is dead, but he passed on the shield.
Well, yeah, like in that whole Disney Plus series, we got to see the whole evolution of Anthony Mackie's Falcon. I'm forgetting his character name, but like, he took over the role of Captain America.
Mm.
But yeah, so there were some big moves. Like Deadpool got moved from, I think it went from July, no, it went from May of 2024 to July. And then
Mhm.
originally Captain America 4 was in July. And now Captain America 4 got moved to basically it's February 14th of 2025, which is, what is that? That's Valentine's Day. So if you're a big fan of Captain America, you can go watch him on Valentine's Day 2025. And then we also had Thunderbolts, which was on the schedule for next year, move to 2025. So those are like the big Marvel moves.
Mhm.
We know that now because of all those moves that that May date, the first big blockbuster kick off the summer movie season is empty. And so there's a number now that date, I think it's May 2nd, is probably it's a prime candidate for another big blockbuster to take over. A lot of people are speculating that Warner Brothers should take advantage of this and move Dune 2 into that slot because May 2nd would be like that. It's like, movies like the Fast and Furious franchise,
Mhm.
movies like the Marvel movies, or sometimes even DC movies, or even, like, I don't think Star Wars has really taken advantage of that, but certainly a lot of big franchise films. Like even I think Jurassic World, like I think at one point, a lot
But
of these
wasn't
movies
Dune
like
2
come out and
slated for, I mean, it was like basically finished, right? It was already like wrapped up and ready to go. Why would they wait 6 months for that?
for Dune 2, right?
Yeah.
So they moved it initially because it was going to come out. It would have already come out by
No,
now,
I
but
know.
because of the
And
strike.
they couldn't do the promotion for it, which is
Right.
why they moved it. But why would they wait until May 2nd to release it? That's a
It
long
just
delay.
it just from a distribution standpoint makes sense to do it in May because you're likely to catch more of that summer holiday season and
Mm.
therefore drive more ticket sales and bring more people in and potentially have a higher box office return than
I
I
still
think. I
feel
think
like
their
they're
current
gonna
date
try
is
to
April or
release it this
March.
year. I won't be surprised if they like announce it for December or something, like Christmas.
I don't think Warner Brothers will do that because they already have three movies coming out in December: The Color Purple, Wonka, and Aquaman 2. So it doesn't make
Yeah,
sense for
that's
them to
true.
like pile on,
Yeah.
you know.
I don't
Um,
think they're gonna wait until May for a movie that was already ready to go. That's a big delay. That's 7 months.
it's I mean, to be honest, right now I think it's set to come out in spring of 2024 anyway, so it wouldn't be a huge difference compared to where it is now.
Hmm.
Um, so a couple of months more than, if that's what people have to do to wait. And this, I think if Warner Brothers made that decision, it wouldn't be anything that's unprecedented. Like one of the other Warner Brothers movies that actually kind of stuck out to me, by the way, was Clint Eastwood's. I think it's meant to be his last film, Juror Number Two. It's Clint Eastwood like saying, "This is it. Then I'm calling it a career." And this was greenlit a year or so ago. I saw about it, something about it in Deadline or another one of the trades, and so that was in production, pause, and now is going back into production. So you've got like not just these big comic book movies that were affected. Of course, there were like Clint Eastwood's, last movie of his career, his illustrious career. There was also, of course, Beetlejuice 2, which is Tim Burton is directing that, and I think Michael Keane is coming back in the role. So there's a lot of these big movies that are moving around across the not across the Spider-Verse, beyond the Spider-Verse. The third movie in that series is also now getting back to production because the voiceover work couldn't be done because all these actors, weren't able to work. So the animation work, I think they continued working on, but the voice acting stuff is now getting back. So yeah, ultimately, a lot of these movies that were affected, we'll see how things work out because like Pedro Pascal is in Gladiator 2, but also in season 2 of The Last of Us. And now
Hmm.
both of them are going to go into production. And I think what you told me before the show, Gladiator 2 is going to take priority, and then
Yeah.
The Last of Us has to work around that.
Yes. So we're
So
going to
it's
see
it's
a
going to
lot
be
of
interesting.
that. We're just going to overall see a lot of shifting schedule shifts. I do think that there's going to end up being recast because there are going to be actors that can't balance all of these projects that are going to try to push and all film immediately. We're going to see people filming like 2-3 movies back to back to back, whereas which also concerns me for quality reasons. We know just by the Marvels, when you push out movies too fast, sometimes things get skipped and missed, and the movie overall suffers. So I'm really curious to know how it's all going to play out, but I think we're going to be seeing, as Dan said, the ramifications of the strike up until, I mean, years to come, at least a year or two, I think.
I agree. And guys, let us know in the comments below what you think. This is a big deal. Like this was our first double strike, I think, since the 60s. And well, if you go by what Ronald Reagan, who was the president of SAG at the time, went on to become the president of the United States, maybe Fran Drescher has got herself a presidential run in the future.
Yes.
But in the meantime, I think we've got a deal here for 3 years. IATSE is the next big union to go into negotiations next year with the studios. So the studios aren't quite, out of they're still in the thick of it. If anything, I hope they've learned their lesson here and they start negotiating early with IATSE, so they don't have to worry about like a little final, like last minute 11th hour deal and then pushing it for a week and then ending up in a 3-month long strike. But the actors are back to work, the writers are back to work, and Hollywood is back to work. So guys, let us know in the comments what you think about that. And of course, we'll be, if there's any more updates about this, any more movies get moved around and are affected by it, we'll cover that on the show. And so you can always check back here for more information on that and so much more. So yeah, keep liking and subscribing. We do appreciate that. I think that really helps out the channel.